Wait! Wait, this isn't right!
Well, it's too late now!
No, I mean, we did this already!
What do you mean?
Ah, fuck it! It's nothing! Just shake these fucking guys!
You got it!
Spec Ops: The Line was released nearly 10 years ago. In the ephemeral genre of third-person shooters, that's basically like a century ago. Is it in any way relevant today? Is there anything useful to be gleaned from replaying or continuing to understand and interrogate this game? A few years ago, I made a slightly stilted and awkward video essay on Spec Ops: The Line that focused on the choices it offered to the player and how that affected the storyline. I think the arguments and how those choices are presented in the game not only stand up to this day, but remain some of the most effective deliveries of choice in action games. Since it was released, we have continued to get largely basic stories with extremely mechanical and telegraphed choices. Even some recent RPGs that I have enjoyed make few concessions to making choices feel natural or built into the flow of the game. Having replayed Spec Ops: The Line again, I revise my opinion slightly. The choices are strongly telegraphed, they are very obvious, but they still stand in stark contrast to most choices presented in video game stories, which go far beyond obvious.
We got an open path straight to Gould.
What about the civilians? We gotta save them.
Look, I know it sucks, but Gould's vital to our mission. The civvies aren't.
Our mission is to rescue people.
Please, Captain. We need Gould. Let me take the shot.
We can't let these people die, Walker.
In other video games, outcomes are often presented clearly, as well as the mechanical changes that will follow on from that choice. I can understand where these impulses come from for game developers, but I feel that they are inappropriate for driving a story where you need both the sense of the unknown and a natural way to make those choices in order to make the situation more interesting. And I'm talking here specifically about story-related choices. Obviously such things that are mechanically explicit, like what ability you get or what card you can add to your deck, do need to be explicit and really should be decoupled from any story choices. As an aside, for all that I love Alpha Protocol, many of you will know just how much, and the fact that the choices you routinely make throughout the game, whether story or mechanical, are all intertwined and all interconnected. For example, kneeing people in the face constantly will give you bonuses to kneeing people in the face, and so on. I do feel that such an intimate connection can be harmful when you incentivize story choices through how a player wants to play the game mechanically. In Alpha Protocol, this is mostly harmonious. You'll generally get bonuses to how you play based on how you play, but not all developers are so diligent. So that part of Spec Ops: The Line stands up, and disappointingly hasn't been beaten. But what about the actual story content and plot? Have stories about failed American exceptionalism, military brutality, and hell roads paved with good intentions become passé? A decade ago, Spec Ops: The Line stood out in delivering a somewhat critical story about both military shooters and perhaps US military operations, while in the guise of a military shooter about a US military operation gone wrong. It was certainly having its cake and eating it, but I think it was mostly successful, even though gamers, then as now, are probably not ready to accept slightly more elevated concepts that it attempted. However, Call of Duty still trucks on, and even recently featured a campaign where the writers chose to depict a real-world US atrocity, the Highway of Death, as having been perpetrated by Russia. Call of Duty has form for US and Western political propaganda, and whether conscious or unconscious, its developers have always been happy to help perpetuate myths and fabrications. It's a video game, yes, and fiction, yes, but these things have an impact on people's perceptions and views. The stories that we tell are a reflection of beliefs and projections of assumptions and desires.
We surrender, sir. Dubai is yours.
Where is Conrad?
Where he's always been. Upstairs, waiting for you.
What story was Spec Ops: The Line trying to tell? In studying history, we try to look at a variety of sources, whether written or material. Coins, buildings, houseware, clothes, all these things can help our understanding of the past and provide valuable context. But even in written sources, we should never forget that books, letters, histories, and the like are only part of what is available to us. Inscriptions have often been a valuable source. In the case of ancient history, sometimes the only source. There are pieces of graffiti across the wrecked Dubai, primarily focused on criticizing the actions of the US and the damned 33rd. There is one, perhaps a third of the way into the game, that perfectly encapsulates the message of Spec Ops: The Line, that I believe ties the textual and subtextual themes of the game together. There is no man righteous, not a one. There is nothing profound in that, but the story makes clear that no character's actions are justified. Not Walker's, not Conrad's, not the Radiomans, or Gould's, or even Adams's or Lugo's. All are damned by their actions, though they may think themselves righteous. And they do, perhaps apart from Agent Gould, who, as in charge of the CIA operation in Dubai, is under no illusions as to what he is doing and why.
Forget it. There's no point. The water's gone. That's all that matters. Fuck. This ain't how it's supposed to end.
He was right about you.
Look, if people find out what he did, the whole region will declare war on us. And we'll lose. Now the world will never know. You're insane. It's funny. Gould said the same thing. What I did may not have been nice, but it was right. Besides, it's not like I'm walking out of here. Just do me a favor, huh? Don't let me burn. Go on, Walker. Do it. Please.
Walker is ultimately the most misguided of all, even before the whoops, war crimes moment with the white phosphorus that triggers a mental break and leads him to externalize his actions to the fictional idea of Conrad. The moment did not work very well for a lot of players. For all that there are choices in other parts of the game, the use of white phosphorus to attack a heavily fortified enemy position is ultimately taken out of your hands. Nobody appreciates being railroaded into a war crime, and while I think that part of the game is not pulled off as elegantly as the rest of it, I think there is good reason why it is so forced and important to the overall narrative. The thread of no man righteous must apply to everyone, ultimately perhaps the player included. Not perhaps the most comfortable idea, especially in a medium primarily dedicated to entertainment, but it is consistent with the rest of the game. Walker may have already crossed the line before this point, having exceeded his orders that were to confirm the presence of survivors and then immediately radio in for extraction.
That's enough, Lugo.
We're just keeping it light, boss.
Yeah, I don't need light. Need you focused on the mission.
What mission? We're basically poking a dead dog with a stick.
We have our orders. Locate survivors, get the city immediately. Radio command from outside the storm wall. Send in the cavalry, and go home.
Not to argue, but this ain't exactly within our mission parameters.
Yeah, well, our mission went from recon to rescue the minute we found U.S. soldiers butchered.
Bucking orders. I like it.
Orders ain't worth following if it means leaving people to die, Lugo.
You fail to do that in the first 10 minutes of the game. Everything beyond is Walker playing the hero. But including this breaking point when Walker can truly transition to the monster that he becomes, ultimately Walker and co wipe out an entire infantry battalion, underlines this point. If the player character, the player, can walk away from all this smelling even faintly of roses, the whole effect is undermined. The player is always right, always does the right thing. This is what video games are. But Spec Ops The Line does its best to undermine that and consequently to make you consider your experience. This is part of why I like the game and keep on coming back to it, because it is an interesting thing to put into your game. Of course, this does make Spec Ops The Line that little bit more awkward. Is the correct choice not to play? To just switch the game off? That is not the intention, but they did want players to get angry at the developers. Quote from Walt Williams, the writer on Spec Ops The Line, in this IGN article shortly after its release. Angering people was an active goal, particularly with this scene. Williams didn't care about crossing a line. We hoped we would piss people off. We wanted people to get angry because we felt like that was a real emotional response to that scene. The developers, in particular writer Walt Williams and director Corey Davis, were quite explicit in regards to what they wanted to achieve and elicit in the player. They have spoken a lot about it, both obliquely before the game's release and much more afterwards. I will leave links to a variety of articles and interviews that go into this. The whole event around Walker deploying the white phosphorus has never sat particularly well with me on previous playthroughs. It does feel crude, less elegant than the rest of the game, and almost not fitting in. Another look at it makes me think there is no good or easy solution for putting something like this in your game. It is deliberately provocative and somewhat heavy-handed, but allowing the player to evade the situation would blunt and diffuse the moment. It is also necessary to take Walker across that line, a point of no return for the journey he began when he disobeyed his orders right at the beginning of the game, and it brings the player along. But how is it different from any other game that does this, and with less concern for provoking thought, and more for naked shock value? Call of Duty has been a regular offender, with no Russian in Modern Warfare 2 pushing you to murder civilians. No, the game does allow you to skip that level entirely. The difference is not easy to appreciate, and certainly not purely from the context of the game without any outside comments from developers. Nevertheless, I feel the general level of discomfort and questioning that the game provides makes the whole package probably worthwhile. As a moment, the white phosphorus scene may falter, but Walker's journey and ultimate descent into darkness hinges on this pivotal moment.
Captain Walker.
Jeff Riggs, now get in here before a sniper blows your goddamn head off.
Ultimately, this line of thinking is trying to square the circle. Spec Ops The Line attempts something interesting and succeeds only in part. For some people, it may not work at all. It is flawed, imperfect, but I find this flawed attempt more interesting and engaging than many other games. It's why I keep coming back to it and keep thinking about it. Ultimately, I want more from games to go further, to think more along these lines and ask more of the player. Some do, but scant few military shooters, and they're perhaps the most in need of a little introspection. I actually collected all this footage and replayed the game a little over 6 months ago, and since then it has been marinating in my mind, and this script has been emerging. I don't really think I'm any closer to understanding the game better, but my desire for being able to engage with games in this way has only gotten stronger. Spec Ops The Line still stands out in this, but there are also a lot more games coming out that I have not played, so I'll keep on searching. As I do, I bring us back to the graffiti in the game. I won't say that it's an overlooked part of the game. There are several sections where you're made to walk slowly past specific scenes, including dramatic graffiti, but it is a pervasive element throughout the game. It is one of our means of insight into what happened here in Dubai, what is continuing to happen, a record of the sad story we are forced to participate in. Whether authored in a coherent statement with the rest of the game's writing, or just thematic content quickly thrown in, it's a surprisingly impactful part of the game. There is no man righteous, not a one.